What's shaking, oddities? So it looks like the U.S. is officially bombing Iran now over the weekend, and this is something that's been planned for many, many years before even 9/11. A lot of people don't remember the U.S. and Israel used to arm Iran. And it's, people like Dave Smith say if you want to know who the next big enemy is to the American government, look to who they're funding now. And that is just a history that is pretty long in the modern era of them funding certain regimes and then going against certain regimes that they funded. So this was a part of the plan. Wesley Clark talked about the 7 countries in 5 years. It's taken much longer than 5 years because there's been all kinds of different hang-ups, and that was to be expected. I assume they realized they couldn't actually do it in 5 years, but I'm sure that they were going to try to do as much as they could. But these things are not easy. And a lot of people also don't understand that America, the U.S. government, along with the UK government and Israel too, they've overthrown so many other regimes, foreign regimes, some democratically elected, if you can believe there is such a thing. And, we have no business being in these other countries, policing these other countries, overthrowing these other countries. It's just everything that our founding fathers warned us about. Our founding fathers were non-interventionists. And, you can talk about the things they were wrong on, but that was certainly one of the things they were correct on is non-intervention, peace, and trade with other countries. Because they had seen through the prism of history how nations had been brought down via war. And war has a way of really causing tyranny at home. And look at all the freedoms we lost and how much the government grew right after 9/11. And they had that war planned, the war on terror, before 9/11 even happened. And they've had this plan for the greater Israel, New Middle East for longer than that. And so they're cinching that up. They're balkanizing the Middle East. And it's kind of funny because you see that there's certain Arab countries, the rich ones, that are still doing business with America, the UK, Israel, and different things like that. And so it's really the poorer parts that have to pay, that have to be destroyed. I know Tehran, and there's a lot of money in Iran, natural resources, lithium in Iran. And so go back to 1953 when the U.S. and the U.K. government overthrew the government of Iran and started this trend. And I see the term, I was talking about non-interventionist earlier just a minute ago, but I see the term going around all the time, isolationist. And that term was, I don't know if it was created then, it was probably created before that, but it was certainly popularized under the Woodrow Wilson administration, something I've talked about on my show many times. He created this propaganda department specifically designed to talk Americans into going along with their sacrifice in World War I. It was called the Committee on Public Information, and Edward Bernays, the father of propaganda, worked for that as well as many other corporate PR men like George Creel and Walter Lippmann. And they knew through psychology and propaganda techniques that they could talk Americans eventually into their part in the war. And they did, and it worked. And they said that that would be the war to end all wars. And by the way, Wilson ran on keeping us out of war and then turned around and did just the exact opposite. So this idea of calling people who are anti-war, who are actually non-interventionists, isolationists, that is a liberal agenda created by a liberal administration. And their goal was to build up the empire. And if you'll notice, and this is one of the reasons I got out of conservatism, I stopped following conservative media for the most part. I realized at some point, they're not patriotic. They're not America first. They're not for the average guy, girl. They are empire first, and the empire's agenda first. And the empire, well, it's basically controlled by large moneyed interests. Money makes the world go round, and the love of money is the root of all evil, and that is truer today than ever. And you can see that during wars, during times of chaos. It's almost always, at the end of the day, about money. Natural resources, influence, destroying corporate competition, those kinds of things. So you're seeing these things carried out, and the conservative media are water carriers for the empire, just like liberal media is to a different degree. And they need both left and right to kind of divide the people, left-right media, to keep the people divided, because obviously a house divided won't stand strong, and won't think about the things it needs to think about and take care of the things it needs to take care of. And so we've been trained since 2016 into defending Trump rather than ourselves. And that's been another ongoing theme of my show. And I see people who consider themselves conservatives doing this all the time. And the media, the conservative media, is as bad as the liberal media in just slightly different ways. And they've trained people to only think about Trump and to believe that when something bad is said about him, they have to feel it in their hearts. And they've made people overly emotional to the point where they don't care about what's right or wrong. They don't care about the Constitution or the law. It's just about defending the tribe, defending the tribal leader. And even when he does things that they would have attacked the liberal president for, they give him a pass or even praise it. So they've created this fanboy. No longer is there a vigilant citizen, and he's been missing for many years, but now they've created just the opposite, a vigilant fanboy who knows nothing really except defending the leader and defending the herd. And so it is good to see some people speaking out against the U.S.'s involvement in Iran and what Israel is doing in the Middle East altogether, especially in Iran. A lot more people are realizing, hey, this has nothing to do with us. Iran's almost 8,000 miles away from the U.S. Israel's got nukes. Why can't Iran have nukes? And they probably don't even have nukes. You know, we've been hearing that for 30 years or more. So I think that it's a wild time. A lot of people are saying it's the end times. Here's the end. You know, it's coming soon. But people have been saying that forever, and there's always wars and rumors of wars. So nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. And they will use our religious beliefs to screw us over. Israel does that all the time. They know what Christians believe and what we've kind of grown up with thinking culturally. So they're going to use those kinds of things and make us think it's the end and make us have knee-jerk reactions. And a lot of Christians will be like, well, there's nothing I can do. This is prophetic, because they think everything is prophetic when it comes to Israel, no matter what, because most of them don't even really read the Bible. So all these fake evangelists and these Israeli agents, if you will, propaganda agents and Israel firsters, they will use our beliefs against us and make us think that, oh God, it's the end times. There's nothing we can do. Just sit back and let it happen. Just like GovCorp fools us to getting behind these politicians. Don't do anything in your own life to make any positive changes. Just sit back, go vote once every 2 to 4 years, and you'll be saved. We'll save you from the Democrats. And they never do. And it's all about keeping hope alive. False hope, hopium, as corporate calls it. And, you know, a lot of the things that I've said here, I've said many, many times, but I think they all need to be said once again, because people during these times of war and when these things start to escalate, they get desperate and they stay glued to the news and they're on edge and they believe a lot of propaganda. And I think that they need to be reminded that a lot of this stuff is bullcrap and we're repeating a lot of the same things over and over again. You know, tell somebody about the Hegelian dialectic. There's still a lot of people, especially conservatives, that don't even know what that is. There's so much that the conservatives don't know about because the media has dumbed things down to the point where they only think that they're patriotic and they think that they're standing up for America and being America first when they're not. Again, they're standing up for the empire and they're standing up for their president and the party and the president. They're all crooked and they're on the take. So it comes down to actually getting back to being a vigilant citizen, thinking again instead of only relying on your feelings, getting away from the tribalism and kind of distancing yourself from these parties, because these parties are corrupt. They use them against us. There's only 2 parties, viable parties in America for a reason. It makes it so easy to divide the people and keep us infighting, so we really don't figure out how this thing works. Well, I figured out how it worked. It's been over 10 years now. It's been like almost 15 years now since I started figuring out how these things work. And once you are able to really step outside of the party and out of the left-right paradigm, then you're able to see things a lot clearer. And that was not something that just happened overnight. It was a process. It's still an ongoing process. But I've managed to do that. I'm not saying I'm right about everything or I know everything, but I'm telling you, I know how these political parties work. I know how propaganda and psychological warfare works because I've studied it. I've put the time in to study it instead of watching just bullcrap media that is partisan, trying to get me to be loyal to one party or the other. I've put the time in to study what makes us tick, how our minds are controlled, the techniques that they use, all the stuff that Edward Bernays and Walter Lippmann talked about, and Cass Sunstein and all that stuff. You have to understand these techniques to understand how your mind is so easily controlled. And when we're in a mass of people instead of individuals, we think in a herd and we're even more easily controlled. And so that's what the parties do. All parties are collectivist by nature, and people start to think about the parties instead of what's right and wrong. Again, these are things I've said many, many times, but I just want to reiterate them because people need to hear this. A lot more people hopefully are waking up and they need to hear that there's other ways of thinking and that you don't have to just side with one lame party or the other because those are low information. They keep it stupid so it's easier to control us. And that's the bottom line. So I hope that everything is all right in your world. I'll check back with you soon. Thanks for watching this. Cheers and blessings. And remember, their order is not our order. See ya.